Have you ever wanted to run macOS on your Windows PC? Or maybe test out a Linux app without, messing up your main system? What if I told you that you can run multiple, completely separate computers all inside your one physical machine? Well, that's the power of virtualization. And if you're studying for your CompTIA A+ exam, you've got to know this stuff. So let's dive in.
So, here's what we're going to break down. We'll start with the absolute basics of virtualization. Then, we'll meet the software that makes it all possible. From there, we'll see how that same tech powers the cloud. After that, we'll get into cloud services, cover the tech specs and security you can't afford to ignore, and finally, help you figure out how to choose the right solution for the job.
All right. First things first, what in the world is virtualization? At its core, it's really just about making one computer act like many. Now, the official definition is the ability to run multiple operating systems at the exact same time on a single physical computer. Each of these little digital computers is called a virtual machine, or VM for short. You might also hear it called a guest OS, which is a great way to think about it. It's like a guest living on your main computer's hardware, which we call the host. So how does this actually work? Let's take a look. It all starts at the bottom with your physical hardware, your actual computer. Right on top of that sits a really special piece of software called a hypervisor. Now, this hypervisor is the secret sauce. It's the traffic cop that carves up your computer's resources, letting you run Ubuntu, another copy of Windows, and even macOS, all at the same time, and, this is key, completely isolated from each other. So, why do we even do this? Well, it all comes down to one word: efficiency. Believe it or not, a typical physical server in a big data center often uses only about 10% of its total processing power. That is just a huge waste of money and electricity. Virtualization lets us fix that. We can run maybe 8 or 9 different servers on that same single piece of hardware, finally getting our money's worth.
Okay, let's talk a little more about that magic piece of software I mentioned. It's called the hypervisor, and it is the engine that drives all of virtualization.
For a CompTIA A+ exam, you absolutely have to know the two main types. First, you've got a Type 1 hypervisor, which we call bare metal. Why? Because it installs directly onto the server's hardware. There's no other operating system underneath it. This is what the big data centers use for maximum performance. Then you have a Type 2 hypervisor. This one is host-based, and it's basically just an application you install on your existing OS, like installing VirtualBox on your Windows 11 laptop. This is what you and I would typically use on our desktop.
And looking at this side by side, the difference is super obvious, right? On the left, that Type 1 hypervisor is sitting right on the hardware. It is the operating system. But look to the right, the Type 2 hypervisor is just another program running inside your main OS. Really understanding this picture is key.
So what do we actually use this for in the real world? Well, imagine this. You're at a law firm that just upgraded all its PCs to Windows 11, but their super important legal software only runs on Windows 7. Uh-oh, no problem. You just spin up a Windows 7 virtual machine to run that old app. It's also perfect for something called sandboxing. That's where you test a suspicious email attachment in a VM where it can't possibly harm your real computer. Or for developers who need to see if their app works on Windows, Mac, and Linux, all without buying 3 different machines.
Okay, so now we get how virtualization works on a single computer. But what happens when you take these same ideas and apply them on a massive global scale? Well, that's when you get the cloud.
At its heart, cloud computing is really just virtualization offered as a service. It's the on-demand delivery of IT resources, things like servers, storage, databases, and software, all over the internet. The really crucial part is the business model. You only pay for what you use. It's a concept called metered utilization, kind of like your electric bill.
And there are a few different ways you can use the cloud. A public cloud, like Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure, means you're renting servers that are on shared hardware with a bunch of other customers. A private cloud is infrastructure built just for one single company, giving them way more control. And a hybrid cloud, well, just like the name says, it's a mix of the two, letting you keep your super sensitive data in-house while using the public cloud for other things.
Now, when you start using the cloud, the services you buy will almost always fall into one of 3 buckets. You will absolutely see these on the exam: IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. Let's break them down.
The easiest way to think about this is like a stack. At the very bottom, you have infrastructure as a service, or IaaS. This is the most basic level. You're just renting the raw building blocks: virtual servers, storage, networking. Go one level up and you get platform as a service, or PaaS. This gives you the infrastructure plus all the tools in the environment to build and run your own applications. And then at the very top, you have software as a service, or SaaS. This is the finished product, a ready-to-use application you just access over the web, like Microsoft 365 or Google Docs.
And this table here, it makes the division of labor perfectly clear. With IaaS, the cloud company manages the physical hardware, but you're in charge of the operating system and everything on top of that. With PaaS, they manage the OS for you, so you can just focus on your app and your data. And with SaaS, you manage nothing. The provider handles everything from top to bottom. You just log in and use the software.
Okay, so this all sounds amazing, right? But what do you actually need to run it, and what are the risks? Let's get into the key technical and security stuff you need to know.
All right, here is a massive tip for your A+ exam. To run virtual machines, your computer's CPU needs special hardware support. For Intel, it's called Intel VTX. For AMD, it's AMD V. And here's the kicker. This feature often has to be manually turned on in the computer's BIOS or UFIe settings. It's a common stumbling block. You also have to have enough RAM to run your main OS, plus every single virtual machine you want to have running at the same time. And don't forget, each VM is a full-fledged computer, so it needs its own dedicated chunk of your hard drive space.
Now for the serious part. Let's talk security. Because while virtualization gives you this great isolation, it's not a magic shield. There are some really big risks you have to be aware of.
The absolute biggest boogeyman in the virtualization world is something called VM escaping. This is a total nightmare scenario where some malware inside one of your guest VMs finds a bug in the hypervisor software and escapes out into the real world. From there, it could take control of your main host computer or even attack your other VMs. This is why it is so important to keep your hypervisor software patched and updated, just like you would with your operating system.
So, we've covered VMs, and we've covered the cloud. But there's another related technology you'll definitely see on the exam: containers. They're a more lightweight type of virtualization, so let's see how they fit in.
Check this out, because this diagram shows you the crucial difference. On the left, a virtual machine needs its own complete copy of an operating system, that guest OS. That makes it powerful, but also kind of big and slow to start up. Now look at the container on the right. Notice something missing? There's no guest OS. Containers are a leaner way to do virtualization where applications share the host computer's OS kernel. This makes them incredibly fast and super efficient, and it's why they've become so popular for modern apps.
And here it is. This is probably the single most important takeaway from this whole thing. It's a super common point of confusion, so let's make it clear. Virtualization is the underlying technology that lets you create virtual machines. Cloud computing is the service model for delivering that technology and other resources to customers over the internet. They are not the same thing. One is the tech, the other is the service.
All right, to wrap things up, let's think through a classic CompTIA A+ scenario question. A law firm has two different problems. They need to run old, incompatible software, and they need a flexible way for their developers to test a new app on Linux. So based on everything we've covered, what single technology solves both of those problems efficiently and securely? If you can answer that, you are well on your way to acing your exam.